by Jerónimo de Loaiza, the viceroy, the Bishop of Lima. And it starts after the crimes of the viceroy, who was his protector. The Count of Nieva was his protector. And what I think here is happening is Jerónimo de Loaiza was in favor of educating indigenous elites as Spaniards. Toledo and Toledo's circle, who came after him, were against. And that was the position that then Sarmiento de Gamboa took. And this position was led in Peru theologically by José de Acosta. This is the most famous one. So I think that we also can see how so friendships and enmities are moved a lot by this contentious issue of the education of indigenous people, but also how the Inquisition is very dynamic for them. In the case, for example, of the most famous Iluminado, Francisco de la Cruz, he had his position towards indigenous education almost saved him from being burned, but almost, very close, but he was like unrepentant, so it didn't. In the case of Sarmiento de Gamboa, I think his punishment is so light because he took a position that was in dialogue, was against Loaiza, I think they're like personal enemies, but in favor of Toledo, the new viceroy, was against indigenous education. So I think that there's a Game of Thrones going on there. Sorry for the continuous references, but it was started by Jerónimo de Loaiza. And the second point, they mention rings, and the Martian and the Venusian rings are brought materially to the tribunal. And we have in the file also the answers by the Maestro Duarte, who was the metallurgian who worked for Sarmiento. And he said, I made the rings, but I make rings for a lot of people. I didn't know that these were magical ones. And what is very differential about the rings is an object that there are no Andean pre-Columbian rings. It's something differential of Spaniards in the Andes. They are all the only ones who have rings and who hire metallurgians to do rings. So thank you so much for your questions. I'll super include this in because it's very important in the article.
Well, very quickly, because I think that the rest of my partners have longest answers. But about the speciality, about the Inquisition, and I will present again this map. And it was quite surprising for me because the cases related to California was not only related to these regions, but also the wider New Spain and even places that are not in this map. I think that the most amazing case was a kind of a sailor who was accused for a heretical proposition that took place in Nootka, very northern island in the Pacific, and was related to the relationship between the Franciscans, Dominican, and also the fur traders of the Pacific. So I think that is interesting because it's not only the history of this institution with some kind of specific inquisitorial commissioners, but also the people who were accused and who accused another people in a constant movement. So I'm studying the mission since some years before. And I found that there's a very strict, I don't know how to put it, a very strict difference between the nomadic population of Indians and the sedentary people who came from Spain. But I found that the Spaniards and the colonizers and the missionaries were in many ways nomads. So I think that the inquisitorial archives are very important to trace these trajectories, not only the inquisitors or the missionaries, for something from the common people that is difficult to find it in other cases or archives. Well, and thanks, and I'm really appreciated to be here with very brilliant colleagues like you.
Well, I have to say thank you for that question. In my perspective, the how-to it's pretty metacognitive. Like it's just that awareness, right? That most of the time we fade ourselves in the field. So we believe that the field are neutral and that we are just kind of vehicles for the fields to exist. And it's so far I have gotten away with it because the reality is that when I just work with sex-centered texts, that is the reason why I work with the Inquisition, because I was kind of trying to feel, a distance of everything that you could find in the Inquisition. And literature was the best because it's always fictional. Like you're really playing a little bit on the symbolic realm, but not in the realm of the body. Also, it is the funniest part of the Inquisition, to be honest. And and of the 18th century to a large extent, at least in the Spanish studies, like the 18th century can be very dull, but then all of a sudden just switch to the pornographic literature and it's quite fun. And so because of that, I was quite blind. I was very intellectualizing this until the moment that I had to cross-reference case studies that were real. And in that, I think adaptability was not only the metacognitive awareness, but also adaptability to say, this is not required in the same way, the same approach that will require a textual analysis, right? So I think positionality, which is pretty much what the colonial studies asks from us, like making sure that you know what your position in cultural hegemonic kind of systems is. And that doesn't mean like playing in the victimization or kind of, it's I think one of the most interesting parts that I have found with decolonial studies is this notion of precisely epistemic advantage, or just this code switching of how we can enter and get out of cultural sites without considering yourself half of hybrid, but rather just code switchers. And I find that as an asset more than a problem. So thank you for that. I have to say this was a very interesting. I really wanted to bring this because most of the time I just bring the fun stuff of the 18th century, but I allow myself to bring this to this conference, and I appreciate that you took that.
So thank you for the question about the environmental conditions. And I have to say that this is a line of investigation that came out from my involvement in the ERC project here in Naples, led by Professor Domenico Cecer at the University Federico II, which was called Disasters, Communication and Politics. Discompose, exactly. And so while my, let's say, main research in that project was about a urban history of Santiago de Guatemala, at the same time, I had begun to take a look at the inquisitorial sources to verify if there were sources about witchcraft related to, let's say, change, climatic conditions, environmental conditions, ecological conditions close to volcanoes, and let's say element of the nature like that. But when I was trying to find out something about this, I realized that the main warning for the inquisitors was exactly the concern about the conditions of the buildings. And so I guess that this is something related to the relations that not just men and women, let's say, create with the space, with the environment, but also the institutions, of course, and the men who run the institutions. And so it is something that I want to go more, let's say, I want to go deeper in this topic, but I guess I think I argue that it is possible to enlarge this investigation also to other institutions, no? And in regarding colonial Mexico, there's also, let's say, another complication, which is the creation of what I call a colonial environment, of course, because that was a territory unknown for Spaniards, no? And so I think this is an approach very valuable for me.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your question. To Professor Giannini, thank you for your very interesting question. Yes, of course, in the 19th century, the relationship between the tribunals and the police forces were, for me, very strong. And in particular, in 1996, David Kerzer published the volume, very famous volume, The Kidnapping of Edgardo Mortara, in which he underline the role of the Carabinieri forces to the kidnapping of the young Jewish. Nowadays, I don't have so much information about this relation, talking about the Bolognese context. But I hope to explore the very rich documentation preserved in the State Archive of Bologna, which is very, very voluminous, and I hope to find more and more information about this topic in the future. And to respond to Maria Teresa, thank you so much also for you. Yes, the 19th century has always been underrated. The reason, as I stated in my intervention, in my lecture, I think because it has always been considered a tire remnant of the past, but I'm working hard to tackle this statement alongside with other important historians such as David Armando and Andrea Cicerchia.
Oh, okay. So. Okay, so thank you, my friend, for the commentary. Firstly, I'll address to you. I just think that we can argue that armies, in the beginning, they were very disorganized, and actually they were a corp of mercenaries. So that's the same for navies. It goes the same. They started to transform in the 7th century, and during this century, just before it, they were actually privateers and private ships paid by governments and crowns. So privateers or corsairs, if you may. And then we have the element of heterogeneity amongst armies and navies and etc. It's actually a very interesting topic. So thank you very much for the commentary. And also to Maria Teresa, that's actually a very good question because there is an old discussion, not very old, there's a discussion, like not open discussion with between Frederick Schob and Francisco Bettencourt about this ethnic or social religious groups. How do you classify them? And then you had this really quick answer, I think in All Can Be Saved by Stuart Schwartz, which he said like, oh, okay, so ethnic is not the perfect answer. I think we should stay with socio-religious groups and etc. And I kind of use it to agree with Stuart, but right now at this point of my research, I'm kind of formulating my own opinions, especially about the Moors, which you asked, because especially after talking to Professor Mohamed Saddam, who is born in Saleh, we had like this really good talk, he's professor at Alcalá University, because we were talking about how the Moors, they were more of in the Inquisition, they were more of an ethnic classification, not a group, social-religious group. They were like actually different, like physically different. Not always, but most of the time. And it's actually different from the Moriscos, because the Moriscos, then you can call them like a religious group. We had like, you could pass yourself, if you are a renegade, you could pass yourself as a Morisco. And if you were a Morisco, you could pass yourself as a renegade. I mean, they had this, I mean, a born Christian, like someone born in Europe, they had this interchanging quality. So it's actually a very good question. So I think it depends on the group. On the Moors, I would say they are an ethnic group for the Inquisition. And about the Moriscos, I would say that no, that they are a socio-religious group. And just to really quickly, like, congratulations on the shirt. It's a very beautiful shirt you're wearing, like very Napolitan. It's very nice. So thank you very much for the question and for the commentary.
Thank you very much, Professor Paiva, for the question. As I was creating the thesaurus for the purposes of this presentation, I felt the need to create a macro category that encompassed some of more precise inquisitorial used categories. So my criteria was actions that in any way hindered the correct procedure of the Holy Office went into this macro category. So someone like the person you studied impersonated the commissary of the Holy Office, Afonso Leon de Barbuda, for instance, in Bengal, would enter this category. Someone who managed to escape from the inquisitorial holdings, still thinking whether it shouldn't go in here or not, but for the moment I'm placing it here. Someone who assisted in sending notes to the inquisitorial prisons also. Someone like the group that invaded the inquisitorial facilities in 1590 in search for a so-called kafir of the inquisitor, and then so violating both inquisitorially related personnel and the facilities themselves. Also, this, for instance, led to 7 trials to be copied and sent to Lisbon. So that was my criteria. Anything that in some way was detrimental to the expected procedure of the Holy Office. As for spatiality, yes, I've been working on so-called peripheries of inquisitorial districts for many years now. So spatiality, so managing the distance, what I call articulating peripheries, is something that makes very sense to me, and especially for the purposes of archival constitutions. The fact that you have these, as Bartolomé Scanderbonnet called it, gigantic districts, led to not only procedural differences, but to different forms of archival constitutions, like commissaries in the Spanish Inquisitions in the Americas, constituting archives themselves, such as Buenos Aires, Córdoba, Manila, Nueva Orleans. All of that generated new archival practices, and to understand those difference of procedures due to distance will ultimately lead us to pinpoint more sources of information. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you to all of you. For the Valdesian followers, we will have a private conversation on the last question. And then my warmest thanks to all of you for your contribution for these 2 very stimulating sessions.